What is going on, everyone? Welcome to a review for Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and we will be reviewing Episode 5.12, Missing in Action. This is the third part in the four-part, we're going to call it the D-Squad arc, because this is around the D-Squad, and they are going lots of places throughout this arc. They got the encryption module in the first episode, they got stranded on this planet in the second episode, and now they're trying to get off this planet in the third episode with the help of Commando Gregor. And of course, I'm not going to review the plot. I'm just going to jump right in. Now, um, the focus of this episode was basically around Gregor. It wasn't much about D Squad like it has been in the past episodes. It was more so on Gregor, which everyone has been highly anticipating. Especially the whole like sort of action scene you see him do in the trailers and stuff. Unfortunately, that happens in the last third of this episode. So the last part of this episode is basically him in full commando gear and taking down droids to get to the shuttle. Now, you do have to look for the detail in this episode. Like if you go to the cantinas and everything. Well, no, the one, the what is it? I think I read in Star Wars trivia it was supposed to be called, the place was Power Sliders, but on the front it says Our Sliders because the P was rubbed off. Um, that's where basically he works. But uh, this is where Gregor has been for who knows how long. Um, and someone early on basically read the Arabish off his helmet, and it said Battle Sarish. It turns out they were right because he was in the Battle Sarish, as they said in this episode, which is cool because I was unsure about it before, if I actually heard about it before, but it was actually in a recent Star Wars comic. Sometime I think in 2007 or 2008 was released. I could be off, but who knows? I'm not that into the Star Wars comics, though I do know quite a few things about their history and stuff. Um, Close out this little icon. Oh, I can't close it out. That's a little annoying. Okay, well, anyways. I was a little questioning, like, I think it's Boss Borges or Borkus or something like that. Gregor as a dishwasher is forced to work for. I was like, I was thinking this is kind of silly how like deluded, um, Borkus was with Gregor working for him. Like when Gregor got his gear back and they're talking to Borkus, and Borkus is on the floor tied up, and he's like, "You'll be stuck here working for me by this dishwashers." Well, really, I thought that was really silly at first. Now that I've thought about it and I looked at some like more people's opinions on it, it actually kind of makes sense. Basically, Gregor has been a slave of like menial labor. Um, it's just the one part of this that I think is just doesn't make sense is that how they're running a diner, that gets people at it, of course, but the streets, well, never mind. It's just I wish the droids were more present in the streets, like they're asking civilians and stuff, and like I think for all the detail they put into that one diner, like if you look at the trivia on StarWars.com, there's definitely some like much needed detail needed out. There was so much needed detail out in the streets itself. Stuff like actually seeing like half the inhabitants focused on one side of the city because there's droid patrols on the other side of the city. Stuff that would make sense. No, that wasn't there. Of course, they're focused on Gregor. But I think some more detail could have been needed. For all the detail they've been putting in past episodes, it was kind of absent here. I don't know. I guess it's because it's a planet. They're trying to establish that the planet is very barren and dry. But when you have this one diner inside this, this wasteland full of these references and just trivia altogether, I'm kind of questioning like what is their thinking. Um, on a side note, back to Gregor. And another thing that I think they did good is his transfer from amnesia survivor to Gregor himself. Um, he's really a commando. So this is the philosophy of commando we're dealing with, not an actual clone. the philosophy of a clone was, sort of dealt with Cut LaQuaine in season 2. Though Cut LaQuaine had his memory intact, it's just he chose to avoid the conflict, and that was his philosophy. But here, Gregor's a commando. He has a much stricter sense of duty than a clone. I mean, a regular clone has a very strict sense of duty, but a commando has an even stricter sense of duty. They, are very, very self-efficient, though they're good for teams. Like if you play the video game, you know that. Um, but, just that is the philosophy of a clone, that they step up to duty. That is their natural doing. Now, my question, how a clone can be, sort of be vulnerable to amnesia, I don't know. That is something that needs to be looked up in Star Wars EU, but uh, that is what happens to Gregor. So I think it was a great way to have him as a commando. That way he sort of like steps up to duty. It was under my impression that he was not originally a commando. I think they said that at Celebration 6 or something. Turns out he was a commando before and after, so, big whoop there. About his death in the episode, did he really die? I know some people I was with on Clone Wars Adventures, or just, I log on that day to talk about the episode, were saying that he's dead. They were saying rip Gregor or Lel, where I wear his gear in his honor. He didn't die, okay? Well, he might have died. Who knows? I'm just gonna leave it as an open death. In fact, if you watch the Star Wars, I think it's called Star Wars Download, which I'll have a clip of at the end of this video. If you watch Star Wars Download on StarWars.com, I watch it every week for these episodes. Dave Filoni does say that he could have survived, he couldn't have. He wants to keep his promise. I think that was, a good way to sort of, leave it off for Gregor. That he goes out in a heroic way. Um, like you don't introduce this great character like right away. I mean, it is. I think the one reason people thought he might have died is because it is the Clone Wars style to introduce and kill characters off. Um, no one like Gregor though have they introduced. Like nowhere have they introduced a character that you just immediately feel bad for or fall in love with and kill him off that episode. No, I praise the way they ended this episode with him in that big explosion. It was more cinematic and definitely felt like, did he live? Did he die? We'll have to see. I'm really looking forward to see if he makes it out alive. There are ways that he can make it out. After all, the Separatists are still on the planet. Their shuttle just went up, but I'm sure the Separatists have ways of communication. Unlike the droids, whose communications were damaged, I'm sure they have ways of contacting the Separatists to send more support. Gregor does have a chance of getting off the planet if that is the case. Um, I'd love to see him come back home in a future arc or something. Probably join the Commandos. Um, and the level of detail in his armor is just magnificent. If you see right here, I think they said on trivia that it was some type of digital camouflage. Really, really cool. The old Together Commando, like the commando action, was just spectacular. That commandos are pretty much the one-man army, self-efficient, ready for duty. It was just awesome. The last part of this episode made it completely worth it. Um, I just still question the silliness of like the characters themselves. Like I know this is supposed to be a silly arc, but Gregor was taken seriously, and then you have him interact with characters like what is it, Gascoon? Yeah, Gascoon. I'm starting to forget his name. When you interact him with characters like Gascoon, I just got kind of sick with Gascoon this episode. I'm like, Gregor is, saving. He's fighting a war. He's fighting this. He's a one-man army, and he's doing it for you, so you can get on that shuttle. Don't just, put it as I'm never gonna make it. Don't use your third party. Don't use your stereotype cliches like there's no chance or I'll never make it alive. Stuff like that. I mean, Gascoon, give some respect for the guy. He wants to get you out of there. That was his duty. Um, and you're just trying to, put him down. I'm kind of dramatizing that, but still, I think Gascoon needs a little work there. Um, I was a little scratching my head. after watching the episode, I was kind of questioned, but after watching it a second time, I like it a lot better than before. One reason I didn't like it was I thought this was the last part of the arc. I was actually hoping it was the last part of the arc. It seems kind of ridiculous they're dragging this out to 4 parts, especially with that, that anonymous Republic Jedi cruiser that you can see up there on the planet's surface. Even though apparently there is this thick sort of fog covering the planet that you can't see the below, and that's what makes the sunlight, go down below where you can't see any shadows. Um, Now they're just making conflicting sources where you can see this Republic cruiser up in space through the fog. I don't know. It just seems a little weird. And yeah, that's the one thing that will happen in the next episode. I think the next episode's called Point of No Return, and that is where they do board this cruiser and realize it's basically on a death ride. It is on a death course, a course of doom to a senatorial meeting, which is probably gonna be. Yes, it will be the last part of this arc. Thank God. I just think at this point they're dragging it out, and I love that they had Gregor. I just wish he would have stayed there for a little more, so a few more episodes. Despite that, I really enjoyed this episode. It was definitely a good change from last 2 episodes. Gave a lot of great action, a great much needed action to this droid arc. With that, Missing in Action gets a 8.5 out of 10. One more thing before we finish off this clip. This is the 100th episode for those who don't know. I thought it was a pretty good 100th episode, not spectacular or anything. I wasn't expecting it to be spectacular. But there was a clip from Star Wars, like I think Clone Wars Download on StarWars.com, which is basically the episode feature for this episode about the 100 episodes. I wanted to put in the last part of this video. I thought it was a good way to wrap it up. So, just stay tuned and watch that clip.
An interesting tidbit about this episode would be that it is the 100th episode of Clone Wars, and that's it's kind of strange. I can remember in the early discussions with George and some of the early press releases when interviewers would ask George, "Well, how many episodes do you think you'll make?" He'll say, "Well, we're making 100," and I thought, "Wow, that would be something if we made 100 episodes of Star Wars." Man, I wonder what that would be like. And I'll tell you what it's like. It's like nothing. We blinked and we passed it. I thought, are there 100 stories in the Clone Wars that are unique enough to do this? And yes, there are. If you look at the first episode and now you look at the 100th episode, the increase in quality across the board, whether it be the character design, the animation, the lighting, everything has gotten better and better and better and better, and I've been really fortunate to have an incredible team. And one thing that we all have common, one thing that I think is true across all 100 episodes and beyond, is that we all love Star Wars. Just like you, we grew up with it, and we want to make sure that what you're getting each week is truly the Star Wars experience we had because we loved it so much. So 100 and beyond, and we just keep on rolling. So thank you very much.